welcome to this episode of Author Success Show. The special guest we are going to have today is Terry Tucker. Terry is the author of the book Sustainable Excellence. What's special about Terry is that he wrote this book while he was healing from cancer. Terry has been an NCAA Division One college basketball player, a Citadel cadet, an undercover narcotics investigator, a SWAT team hostage negotiator, a high school basketball coach, a business owner, and most recently, a cancer warrior. Wow, he has played so many different roles in his life, and today he's going to be sharing his author journey with us. Hi, Terry. Welcome to Author Success Show.
Hi, Jessa. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
My pleasure. So, Terry, tell me, when was the first time you had this idea of becoming an author?
I've always enjoyed writing. I mean, even in school, I was a good student. I wasn't a great student, but the classes that I enjoyed were English and reading and writing and things like that. And so I've always enjoyed writing, but literally the book that I published last year, I wrote in a 3-month period, and I've been battling a very rare form of cancer. And so unfortunately, I had my leg amputated in April of 2020, and I started chemotherapy for these tumors in my lungs in June of 2020. So during that time period when I was healing, before I started chemotherapy, I literally sat down at the computer and wrote this book.
That's amazing, Terry, because usually when we go through a difficult phase of our life, there are so many things, right, that goes in your mind, so many unpredictable things that's probably worrying a person. But you went through all of that, and yet you wanted to share something meaningful with the world through your book. So how did you actually get that courage to do that, Terry?
Well, the book is really kind of, I guess, born out of 2 conversations I had. I used to be, I've had many jobs in my life, but one of the things I did is I was a girls' high school basketball coach when we lived in Texas. And one of my players who had graduated, gone on to college, she had moved to Colorado where my wife and I live. And we had dinner with her and her fiance. And I remember saying to her one night, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And she was like, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about, finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth and then living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had another conversation with a young man who reached out to me on social media and asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but in life. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others kind of thing. Not that those aren't important. They are. They're very important. But I wanted to see if I could maybe go a little bit deeper with him. So I thought about it for a while, and I started writing notes, and eventually I had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back and I was like, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So like I said, literally during that time that I was healing, I sat down at the computer with these 10 principles and started to build stories underneath each of the principles. And the stories are real. They're not made up. They're not, they're actually people I know or incidents that I heard about or things I read about. So they're actual real things, real stories that emulate how these principles can work in your life.
That's fantastic. The way you started the book is really amazing because you actually wanted to give advice to these 2 young people who reached out to you for advice. And a lot of times we ignore this divine message that comes to us, right? When people keep asking us the same kind of questions, maybe that's our life's purpose and we need to help them. And that could reach a lot more people when you put it together in the form of a book. So you actually wrote down these principles as an answer to guide these people. But when did you decide that, hey, this can actually serve a lot more people and can take the shape of a book?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm one of these people that sort of resists things that kind of come along. I like the status quo in a lot of ways. So people started to say to me, hey, you ought to write a book. Hey, you ought to write a book. Hey, you write a book. And I have a very deep faith in God. And there's kind of that old joke that goes, when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never talked to me. God never said anything like that. But I think what God did was put people in my life that were making these suggestions. And, when enough people started to make this suggestion, I kind of was like, well, maybe I ought to pay attention to this and see if this is something I want to do. But I don't know how to, I don't know how to go about writing a book. And so when I decided to do it, I'm like, well, I guess I should have some parameters or some rules or something. Yeah. And I basically gave myself 2 rules, and that's it. The first one was I would write 1 page, a minimum of 1 page every day, except Sunday. I took Sunday off to kind of regroup in that. Yeah. And number 2, I wouldn't edit anything until the first draft was finished. So, there were days I sat down at the computer and literally wrote garbage. It was terrible. And I was like, oh my God, why am I doing this? Why am I wasting my time? But I had that rule. I would write at least 1 page a day. Mm-hmm. And there were many days where I wrote 10 pages or 15 pages just because I was in the groove, so to speak.
Yeah, the flow.
Yeah, the flow, exactly. And then, then there were those days when, I wrote garbage, but the next day I wrote something good. And then I wrote something good. And so you had all this garbage and all this good stuff together. And that's why I'm like, I'm not going to edit until the very end. And then when I went back and we're like, no, that's got to come out. That's got to come out. That's got to come out. And what I was left with was what I felt was a pretty decent book.
That's such good advice, Terry, because these are the things that we keep telling authors when they come to us for coaching. And I'm so glad that you did the right thing. And that's why your book was able to be published at the right time, because a lot of people waste months and years of their life thinking about writing their book and they never take action. But I just love the consistency of writing something every single day, and at least a minimum of a page. Even if you're not happy with the page, you did not go back and self-edit it, but you just kept going ahead rather than looking back, right? So I also like the idea that you kind of had an outline, right? All those 10 principles for the book.
Yeah, I did. I had at least something to go off of. And there's 10 principles, but they're not in any order. Number 1 is not any more important than number 5. And it's always fun for me as an author. I've never given birth to a child or anything like that, but this book is probably the closest I've ever come to something that was near and dear to my heart. And so it's fun for me when people read the book and they reach out and they're like, hey, number 5 was the one that really resonated with me, or number 7 was the one that, and it's just kind of funny to see which ones resonate with different people, because there's always one principle that people kind of glean onto and like, yeah, that's the one for me. I mean, not the rest of them that aren't important, but it's just, there's always one that every person who reads it kind of it does something. It touches their heart in some way, and they resonate with it.
Yeah, and I think even if that one message resonates with them and they're going to act upon it, that serves the purpose of you writing the book.
Yeah, and if I get a chance to talk to them either in person or online, I always ask them, why? Why did that one resonate with you? What's the story behind that? Because I even have one that each principle is a chapter, and the one that resonates with me is this one. It's most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that. I've wanted to do something, but it's like, ooh, kind of scary, or what are people going to say about me if I do that, and things like that. So that's the one that resonates with me because I've done it. That's my backstory with it. But it's always fun to hear the backstory of why a particular principle resonates with a reader.
Yeah, and I'm sure different types of people would be reading your book. But when you were writing it, Terry, did you think of a particular ideal reader for your book?
I guess not initially, but after I'd had it done, I had the first draft done, I was like, yeah, this is probably going to resonate with people that are younger, maybe 16 to 35 or something like that. People that are just kind of starting out in life. Another interesting story. I had an 87-year-old man
Mm-hmm.
who purchased the book and read it and then got in contact with me. And I had no idea who this person was. And he said to me, if I would have had these principles when I was younger, I would have
Mm-hmm.
had a much better life. So that kind of me says it's people just kind of starting off in their life, trying to figure things out. Where should I go? What should I do? What if I make mistakes? All those kind of things. I think it's probably more geared toward them than a middle-aged or an older person who's probably more established in their life.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to just have one kind of a reader in mind while you're writing your book. But if the other people who are outside that particular target group also enjoy the book, then it's great. I mean, you're just reading a wider audience.
Right.
Yeah. So, what else did you do during your writing phase, Terry? How long did it take for you to finish those 10 principles?
The 10 principles probably took me a couple months to, I would take notes and then walk away from it,
Mhm.
think about it later on and go back day after day and stuff like that. So it probably took me a couple months to do that. And then, it took me about 3 months to actually write the book.
Mm.
You're at a point, you've written a book, or have you written a book? A lot of people write, books about things that not that they don't matter, but if you're writing a book about taking your garbage out, probably not a big deal. Probably not a lot of people going to read it, but people write books about all kinds of things. So I was like, I've got a book, but do I? And so I gave it to a couple friends of mine who were in their 30s, a young couple starting out, have a couple kids. And I said, please read this and be brutally honest with me. If you think this is terrible, tell me it's terrible and I won't pursue it. But they both read it kind of independently. And one was in the military, another one was a lawyer. And they both said, no, you got to try to get this published. You've got to try to get this out there. This is good stuff. So,
Right.
it was nice to have what I thought was good confirmed by somebody else that I respected their opinion.
Yeah, I think that gives more confidence to you as the author because, yes, it is your baby, but when beta readers also confirm that, it's a nice thing.
It is. It really is. Because, like I said, I'm not somebody who's written, 10 books and I'm like, yeah, this is good. I'm going to publish it. There was a little bit of, I don't know, is this good? I don't want to put something out there that is not going to be worth people's time to read. So I wanted to make sure that it was worth publishing.
Sure. So, at what stage did you decide the title? I love it. It's sustainable excellence, right? So, at what stage did you decide and finalize on the title of the book?
Yeah, I didn't have a title when I started it. It wasn't like I was going to call it this.
Yeah.
I kind of wrote it, and then it was like when I finally got with a publisher, I was like, well, he's like, what do you think the title should be? I'm like, gee, I don't know. How do you figure that out? It's kind of like, how do you design a cover or something like that? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And so we thought about it for a while, and I kind of went back and I read it, and it's like, okay, it's kind of about excellence. And then I got to a point where so many people, they want to obtain excellence, and then they obtain it, and then what do you do with it? You just leave it there. You maintain. You don't keep growing. You don't keep moving forward. And so I thought, no, this is kind of more of a book about obtaining excellence, but then also sustaining it. Being able to continue to grow and continue to move forward. So it was just literally kind of a hodgepodge of words of, well, excellence. Okay, well, how do we keep excellence going? What do we? Oh, how do we sustain? Sustainable excellence. So it was really kind of a playing with words and then deciding, oh yeah, sustainable excellence. What do you think about that? And my publisher was like, I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it worked out.
Yeah. No, I really love titles that are short, easy to remember, and actually tell what the book is about rather than some, tricky name that needs to be decoded. I think this is really great.
Yeah, I'm like you. I like to read a book and know what it's about, not like, well, what does that title mean? What is this about? So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm more practical, I think, than I am creative. But who knows?
No, I think it's perfect. And I also get this message from what you said, Terry, that one need not have everything figured out before starting the book. For example, your title came much later after you finished writing your book. And a lot of aspiring authors, they procrastinate their book project by saying that, hey, I haven't figured out my title yet. Once I know my title, then I would start writing my book. And it actually doesn't work that way. If you have that inspiration, just go ahead and finish the book. You can figure out other things later.
Yeah, and people can help you with. I mean, if
Mm.
you're writing a book, then you're writing a book. A title can come from me reaching out to you or some friends and saying, "Hey, I got this book, and I think this is what it's about. What do you think? You got any thoughts on a title?" So you can kind of have that collaboration with other people to help you that, and that's exactly what I did with the cover. Because then there was the cover design, and it was like,
Yeah.
well, what colors do you like? And I'm like, I don't know. It was just like, I have no idea, but let's talk about this and we'll figure it out. And that's kind of how that happened as well.
Sure. Personally, I feel, Terry, that an author should just have this amazing message to share with the world that they feel compelled to share. Everything else can be figured out. There are people to help. Like you reached out to a publishing company, right? So what are the things that they helped you to in putting it together?
So I had a friend of mine here in Colorado who knew of a person. I used to be in law enforcement. I used to be a policeman. And this individual was also a policeman. And he was actually a police chief, the head of a law enforcement agency in one of the states here in the United States. And a friend of his asked him, he's like, "Hey, will you go out to California and will you put on a presentation for authors that want to understand police tactics and be able to incorporate those into their writing, into their books?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll be happy to do that." And he goes out there and he ends up meeting his wife, who is a best-selling fiction author, and they get married, and he gets out of law enforcement, and they start this small not-for-profit publishing company. So my friend introduced me to him, and we had a lot in common. We had a very similar background in our law enforcement careers, and so he was like, "Okay, we got to the point where, yes, I'd like to do this project with you and that." And then it was like, "Okay, send me the book, send me the rough draft." And he read it and he's like, "Okay, I think this is great." And then it was, "Okay, we got to come up with a title." So that was the next thing. And, I kind of told you about how that worked. And then it was like, all right, now we need a cover design. And he had a cover designer. And the first cover design, I kind of showed it to my wife and my daughter and my brothers, and they're like, nah, I don't think so. And so then I went and like, no, okay, how about let's go another direction. And the second one was much more, it's 10 principles, and the cover is kind of these 10 big stones that kind of lead on a path that lead upward and that. So it's like, yeah, that makes more sense. And then let's talk color and that kind of thing. And then it was, as I said, I've never had a child. I've never, given birth, but when the editors then took over, so there were 3 different editors, and it was like, they would be like, you should take this out, or you should expand on this, or you should do that, and I was kind of like, how dare you tell me what, this is my book, but I always said, I'll sleep on it.
Yeah.
And honestly, 99.9% of the time, I ended up doing what they recommended because they were the experts. I'd never done this before. So I took their advice and expanded things and took things out and stuff like that. And I felt very fortunate to have somebody that could help me edit it because, yeah, it was good, but it was a lot better once they did their job.
It's really nice to have that kind of a detachment with your book once you finish writing, so that the experts can take over and do their magic. And finally, the end product is going to be a lot better than if you had to do everything yourself.
It was. I mean, I still remember the day that they sent me the hard copy and the paperback, and it showed up, in the mail, and I was like, unboxing it was like, wow, this is amazing. To go from something in your head to an actual book
product.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was exciting. I was really kind of speechless, and that's usually a hard thing for me to be because I talk too much. So.
That's awesome, Terry. I think this is one thing that every aspiring author should understand, that they don't need a big publishing house to publish their book. They don't need a literary agent to represent them. If they believe that their work is worthy enough to be published, there are so many self-publishing houses like your friends, and who can just help with the important things like cover design and editing and interior design, and help you to publish on platforms like Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, that was the nice thing about, my friend and his wife. I mean, she had a tremendous amount of experience about how to get a book published and how to market it and how to do all those kind of things. So it was nice to have sort of her in the background. I mean, he was kind of the one that I was dealing with, but her expertise certainly played a lot into it in terms of getting the book on Amazon, on, the Barnes and Noble, on Apple iBooks, on all the different formats, the platforms where people can access the book.
Right. So at what stage did you start thinking of marketing the book?
I mean, we had started as it was going through editing, we had started talking about, when are we going to release the book? And I'm trying to remember what he told me. He's like, books get released on a certain day. I don't know, it was Tuesday or something like that, and it's like, okay, well, what's realistic and how are we going to do this? And then, how are we going to market it? Amazon, we did an online kind of thing because it was kind of in the middle of COVID and that. Right. So we weren't able to go to a bookstore and do a promotion in that regard. So we kind of had to figure out what the best way to do it was. And I mean, he's telling me, most books, he told me a couple of things. One, there are 800 new books published in the United States every single day. That was one thing. And I was like, wow, I mean, how is my small little book going to get out there and kind of break through? And then two, 90% of all books never get finished. People start them and then they don't end up finishing them. So it was like, okay, I want people to finish the book and stuff like that, and so there's all these little nuances that I didn't know, that I didn't understand. And how do we break through that? And, I used an email list. I had cover quotes from friends that were fairly influential and, had high profile jobs and things like that I asked to give me cover quotes. And so I was able to kind of market through their chain as well. And so it was just little things like that. And, the average book supposedly sells about 200 copies, over the life of the book. And I guess this, but I didn't know this, people don't write a book to get famous or to make money, because you're not going to do that. It's not going to make, I mean, if you write the great American book or the book that makes it all over the world, that's great. But like I said, 800 books published every day, the odds of that are pretty small. And I didn't have a public relations firm or anything like that helping me do this. It was just kind of me and my editor. So I didn't write the book to make money or, to get famous. I wrote the book to help people. And I felt that as long as I was making a difference in people's lives, it didn't matter how many copies the book sold.
Sure. I think that you on your own are doing a lot of things, Terry, like going on podcasts. So the book got published a year ago, and most authors feel that the shelf life of the book is just a couple of months, because after that they stop talking about it. But you are intentional about spreading the word because you have the goal of helping a lot of people, and the best way to help them is to make them read your book. So I feel that by marketing the book, you're not actually marketing yourself as an author, but you're marketing your message, which is a great thing to do. So how did these podcasts, how did they begin, and how have been the results of going on all these shows?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had somebody reach out to me, I guess, who had seen the book online and said, "Hey, I have a podcast. Would you like to be a guest on it?" And I was like, "What's a podcast?" I was like, "What do you mean? What do you want me to do? Is it like a radio show? What?" And he kind of explained it to me. And honest to God, when I first went on my very first podcast, I had all these notes on my computer. They were there. I had all these pages, because I was like, oh my gosh, what if he asked me a question I don't understand? And I mean, now I've probably been a guest on, I don't know, 200, 250 podcasts from all around the world. Wow. And it has been a tremendously rewarding experience. I have met some wonderful people like you that, allow me to come on their podcast to sort of tell my story. And between our conversation, I think we're making a difference in people's lives. And if we do that, then for me, that day's been a good day. And I enjoy it so much that now I've gotten to the point where I don't have notes. I just kind of talk based on, here's my experience, here's what I've been through. Does this help you? Here's what helped me. I hope it helps you. And take it, or develop your own 4 truths, or the 3 F's: faith, family, and friends. Whatever gets you through whatever problems you're having in life, you got to figure it out. And people always say, I spent years writing my book. I get it. I didn't spend years. I spent months. I mean, it flowed. It kind of came to me, and I'm not going to say it wasn't hard. It certainly was, but it was just something that I think I was supposed to do. And because of that, it happened.
Sure. So do you look at your website, Terry, as an extension of your book, motivationalcheck.com? Did it happen around the same time that you were writing the book?
Actually, the website happened first. That was another kind of story where people were like, you should start a website. And I was like, I'm old. I can barely turn my cell phone on in the morning. What do you mean I should start a website? And it was when I started it, it was 4 pages long. And honestly, I am not lying to you about this. It took me 4 months, because I would do something. I'm like, I don't understand what that means. I've got to go research it, figure it out. And okay, come back. Okay, now I can do, oh, wait a minute. I don't understand that. I'm sure my 25-year-old daughter could have done it in about 15 minutes, but literally it took me 4 months. So I didn't initially think of, using the website to market the book, but then it was like, well, yeah, this certainly makes sense I've got this medium here that I can, that I put a new quote up every day, and it's constantly active. So yeah, this would be a great opportunity to market the book. And, I have certain things on certain places on different sites like Facebook that once a month I'll go and put a sort of ad out there for them that I develop, and just to keep the interest alive. And every week you get 2 or 3 sales here or 2 or 3 sales there, and over time it's just kind of it's growing.
Sure. I think it's a very important thing to have an author branded website like the way you have, because a lot of readers would want to continue the conversation outside the book, and they would want to see how can they reach out to you. Do you have a social media presence, or do you have a website? So having these other marketing elements are really important for an author, and you are doing it quite well, Terry.
Well, thank you. It's also fun for me, because you're right. People on my website, you can leave me a message. So people will read the book and be like, hey, chapter 4 was the one I really liked the most. And they'll tell me why. And we'll have a little conversation. And so again, that's to me saying, yes, that book had an impact on this person's life. And that makes me feel good as an author, not just, I just didn't write a book. I wrote a book that makes a difference in people's lives.
Sure. So could we talk a little bit about Terry, the speaker? Because I have seen the speaking page on your website. So are you reaching out to people, or are you getting opportunities to also speak about your subject?
Yes and no. I mean, COVID has certainly put a damper on that. I really kind of turned to podcasting as a way to get my message out during COVID, when I couldn't go out there and speak. Things are opening up a little bit now. I've got a couple speaking gigs that are coming up in the next 4 or 5 months. And in all honesty, I'm having so much fun doing podcasts, and it's much easier for me.
You don't even have to travel. Yeah.
I don't have to travel, and having cancer and, being in a wheelchair now with my leg amputated makes traveling that much more difficult for me. It's not impossible, and I certainly can do it, but it's easier for me to do podcasts. And I think I reach more people in a lot of cases based on the outreach of the podcast, that I do in that. And like I said, I've done podcasts with people all over the world. And so it's not just in the United States that the book is getting some traction. It's kind of all around the globe.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm in India, so I'm sure you're going to have a lot of new readers from India as well.
That'd be great. I mean, I've done several podcasts with folks in India, and it's always been a lot of fun. I mean, they're interested in the book, and I mean, even people from different, in the Middle East. I thought, oh my gosh, why would anybody in the Middle East want to do that? But you just never know who wants to read a book.
Exactly, and I think fundamentally human beings are the same. So your message is quite universal, Terry. So, what would be your final, word of advice for aspiring authors who have something important to share, but they are just not taking the next step?
I guess, and I tell this a lot of times when I speak, is that, regardless of where you are, but especially for younger people, if you're, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you feel that you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things that you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. So if you've got a book inside you, and I believe we all do. I mean, all our experiences are unique. We're not all born with the same gifts and talents, but we all have the ability to become the best person that we're capable of becoming. And if that for you means, writing a book, then do it. And you understand you're going to be frustrated at times. Understand that, you're going to be like, I don't know what to write today. That's okay. Just write something. I mean, I don't care if it's the lyrics to a song, just write it. I mean, but the act of writing will kind of get those creative juices flowing, and then realize that, what, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just write it, just get it down on paper, because it's so much easier to edit. It's so much easier to figure out what you're going to call it, what your cover design is. Don't worry about the small stuff. Get the material down on paper. And if you do that, you're 90% to your goal.
Thank you for sharing that powerful message, Terry. So where can people find out more about you and your work?
So you mentioned it earlier. I have a website that every day I put up a thought for the day. And with that comes a question to kind of figure out how maybe that thought can have an impact on your life. And you can get access to my book there. You can get access to my social media sites. It's motivationalcheck.com will get you to me.
Perfect. We'll have it right below this video or podcast in the show notes. So thank you so much once again, Terry, for coming on Author Success Show.
Thank you for having me on. Hopefully we're going to make a difference in somebody's life today. And who knows, maybe we're aspiring a new author today.
Absolutely.